Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Georgiana with Expressions Craft Studio, and this is a design I want to show you today. I've actually got a couple of different flower petals I'm going to show you here. This is the setup for this first flower petal, and I will try to do a diagram of this as well to put on the Facebook page, but this is the first one I'm making. Initially I really liked this, but as I went on and I made more petals, it became my least favorite. But anyway, I'm going to use, each petal requires one 10.5 inch strip, and I'm just going to take out a couple of these pegs because it's a little hard to fit my fingers and the strips in between, because it's really tight fit there between some of those pegs. So I'm just pulling them out now to make it a little easier for myself. And that's up to you, but this is kind of what I'm going to start with, and if that doesn't work for me, I'll remove those bottom two pegs as well. Which, the downside of that for me anyway is I sometimes forget where I started. If I would make my diagram before I got started, then I would be able to refer back to it, but I tend to do things in reverse for some reason. But anyway, this first one, you're just going to loop around those center bottom two pegs, and you can glue that and position that however you wanted. I started doing it this way, then eventually I tried just looping around using the slotted tool, and then I just made my loop like I've done in previous videos, where I just glue a little loop on the end and then hook it over the slotted pin. So you have options. You can do this portion however you like, but then you're going to go up and around that top center pin. And again, we glue at the bottom of every time we wrap back and forth underneath. So when I remember, I like to bring my strip to the top because it just makes it easier to get it into or between those pins, because as I said, it's a really tight fit. So I just add in my next pin right here, which is on that second row of pins, or that second half circle. And I'm going to bring it down and around under the bottom again. And as I said, we're going to glue. Sometimes the glue works better than others. So this time you want to bring your strip all the way up to the top again, right next to your previous loop. And then you're going to put your pin in. And then you're going to bring that strip down and loop it around that pin you just placed and go back under the bottom pin again. So now you're going to go up to the next loop up above. So basically you're going to start out going high, low, high, low, high, low. You're just going to keep doing that way. And if you can remember that, it hopefully will help you remember to loop your pins correctly. I did a couple where I somehow forgot where I was supposed to go and I missed it, and it was really obvious in the final design, because you might have two short loops stuck together instead of having tall, short, or high, low, high, low. Yes, Gypsy, we're busy here. Move along, baby. So again, we're going wrapping under the bottom after adding some glue and going back up to the high strip on the right side this time. We're going to loop back down underneath that center pin, or the first pin, if you will. And we're going to add glue, and this is where we want to add in those previous pins we took out, I think, or that might have been another one. I did a bunch of variations on this particular idea, so I might get a little confused. Okay, so I'm not going up there. I'm just going to do that bottom one. And so you do the bottom one on the other side, bottom left, bottom right, and then you're going to come back around and do the upper left and upper right pin. And when I remove this from the pins, it's actually quite interesting the way it is. I tried to make it two halves of circle. It didn't quite work out. I may show that later in the video. I don't remember. Because this was so long, I just kind of worked and recorded. I've had to go back and edit it out, so I might be wrong about that. But isn't that cute? Now, if you cut off that tail that's dangling out to the left and just put a stem underneath that, that would just look like a half-open flower or a different angle on a flower. But because I've already made these other petals, I'm going to finish doing those, and I just pinch it together at the bottom, and then I wrap that tail or the rest of that strip around and glue it. And I just try to get my petals all roughly the same size. I don't worry if they're not exact as long as they're fairly close. I gave the top a little pinch and then kind of pushed it back down a little bit. And then we just glue the end. I think I ended up making 8 petals for this flower. Well, I have it here. Let me just double check. Yes, 8. And after I was done, it wasn't my favorite, and my favorite one was actually the last one we did. So if you can hang in there with me, I'm saving the best for last. That's just the way it worked out, but it worked out good. So I think I've got 6 now, and I need 2 more, which I'm not going to show you how to do those. You can just keep replaying each portion where I'm showing you how to loop your strips around the pins if you need to. But like I said there's a couple or several. I think there's 4 or 5 actually different flowers, and I will put timestamps, flower 1, flower 2, you know, in the comments if you want to fast forward through some of this. So here I'm just trying to show you how I get that first loop going and glued. And this portion I really struggled with yesterday, which is why I ended up doing it differently on the last one. And I ended up liking that better anyway, which is where I just made a loop, glued a loop on the strip, and then hooked the loop over that slotted pin. But I didn't figure that out till the last one, so you're going to watch me struggle with this every time we come to a new flower petal. So we're just letting that glue grab a hold. I had it more than once let go on me, so I want to make sure it's got a good grip on that paper. So we put that top pin back in, that top center pin, and we're going to wrap up around that and down, or loop around it and down. And as always, we're going to glue at the bottom. Now you don't have to do this step, but if you're not careful when you take it off or you don't work with it right away, your flower will kind of burst open. So I definitely recommend gluing on this particular flower petal. So now we're going to go back up to the top. We're going to put in our lower pin, or our center. Yeah, we'll call it the center pin. I don't really know what to call it, but it's that second row there, I guess, and we're going to come back down. So you're not actually looping around the top pin, you just want to pull your paper up toward the top to make it easier, because that's a really tight fit there between those pins in that second row. We do the same thing on the right side, pull your paper up and then add your pin back in. And you do kind of have to push it over it a little bit because that paper's kind of tight, and it will make room for your strip though. So you loop back down around, and then we're going to go back to the top row, or the high loop. Come back down, add glue, and then we'll go to the right side and do the same thing. I'm trying to remember where my pen goes. It's toward the bottom there, right next to the slotted pin. And then we're going to do the same thing on the right side. And then we're going to loop around that last pin on the left and the last pin on the right. So this is the same flower petal that we made the first time. I'm just showing you twice how to loop through it. I didn't realize I had done that, but feel free, if you think you got it, to go ahead and skip forward to the next flower petal. And off it comes. And I really do think that's pretty. If you just put a stem underneath that, you really wouldn't need to do anything else with it. So I just take the remainder of that strip again and give it one wrap around, because that's all I had enough left to do. And I cut off the remaining, or the extra, and glue it down. And then I pinch it together at the bottom, and then just a little bit gently at the top. And that is flower petal number 1. So on flower petal number 2, you'll see it's very similar with the board set up. We just make minor adjustments for each separate flower petal. So again, we're using our 10.5 inch strip. And I'm just looping around the slotted pin or peg and the one right above it. But you can see I'm struggling. I mentioned once before the struggle bus, and it is real. Go back and watch it. And I edited a lot of this out, so just, you know, it's not always as easy as it looks, especially when you're all thumbs, which is why I wished I'd gone to the loop at the end of the strip and then just hooked it over the slotted pin route, because that really was the easiest option for me, and I actually ended up liking the way it looked better as well. So I'm trying to hold the paper strip down while holding that little tail in place so that I can add glue to it, and then pull the longer tail back around and hope that they stick. This time I decided, okay, I'm going to use the tweezers to get in there and really help get that glue to set. So we pull our paper strip all the way to the top again. We will add our pin back in, it looks like. And we're going to go straight above those two that we just looped around into the very next row, or half circle. It is a row, but it's a circular row, I guess. Arc. How about that? We'll call it an arc. As always, add our glue to the bottom. Pull your strip up just to make it easier on yourself, because you're going to insert this pin here, and you can see how that strip actually cuts through your pinhole. So you can probably maybe wrangle it eventually down and around there, but it is easier if you just go ahead and pull that strip up. My cat says hello. Yes, Gypsy. When we first opened the door to her, and I literally mean that, she was a stray, she didn't talk. And just this past year, well, because we've had to keep her in the house, that's a long story, but because we've had to keep her in the house, she talks nonstop. So there you can see, I think I made a mistake, and so I decided to undo it and start again. So we're putting that pin back in. And I put it in the wrong spot, which I hopefully figure out. Yeah, so it should go right next to that pin in that second row of arches. And again, I always just try to keep those strips flush with the top of the board so that you don't have a big ridge where your strips all come together at the bottom there. If you keep them even, it helps eliminate that. So now we should go up to that upper loop on the left that's closest to our previous loops, and we're going to come back down, and once we glue, we'll do the same thing on the other side. Again, pulling our loop all the way to the top just makes it easier. Well, actually, we're gluing the top loop anyway, so in that case it was necessary. So we're going to add a pin back in again in that second, or it's actually the first row of arches, I guess. I was just counting the slotted pin as one row, and actually as I'm looking at it, it does go into that same row with the slotted pin. So you're going to do that again on the left and the right, loop those short pins, and then you're going to go back up and loop the tall one. So this is very similar to the first one. In fact, it's identical up to this point if I'm correct, but we're going to change it a little bit right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 more short loops at the bottom of that. And again, this is if you decide to just use this flower petal as the whole flower, and then just put a stem down underneath it, or hide it behind some other stuff in like a bouquet arrangement or whatever. So you don't need to make a bunch of different petals for it, because that is the whole flower. And I think they look really lacy and graceful, maybe is the word I want. I do use my tweezers to hold that, since it's up between, the glue point is up, behind those pins. I want to make sure I get enough pressure on it. So apparently I didn't show you that flower when it was all said and done. I don't know why I didn't. I do think I come back to it here in a little bit, though, to show you. I'll compare it to another one, I think. I will show you all of them at the end of the video. So here again, we're riding the struggle bus trying to get this loop glued. I have found generally the longer I leave it, the easier it is for me normally. But the more I pull on it, the shorter it gets. So, what is that, a catch-22? And this time we're skipping that middle pin. So in that center line with the slotted pin and the 2 pins above it, we're skipping that middle one. We're just not going to use it this time. We're just going straight to the top. Again, you want to pull your strip up just to make things easier for yourself, and slide that pin right into where it would be next to the center pin if you had used the center pin in that center loop, if that makes sense. There we go. And you're going to go down around, check for everything to be flush, and add some glue. Chair's creaky. So now we're going to do the other side, and again we're going to pull our strip up, add our pin, and then loop it back down. So you see how you just left that center hole empty? We're just not going to use a pin in that one this time. Otherwise, I think it's very similar to the other flowers, and this is what I mean about slight variations. And this was just me playing. You know, I would not be the least bit surprised if somebody hasn't done these before. I just haven't seen it anywhere. But there's so much information out there that it's, you know, it's hard to see everything. This was just me playing yesterday, and this was what I ended up coming up with. So I think they're really cute, and I like the kind of light, airy, delicate, lacy look of them. So that's why I kept playing with it. So now we're going to add a short pin again. After we pull our strip up, we're going to slide it right in to that next spot on that lower arc on the left. So pull our strip up, add our next pin, and loop it back down. And again, we're just repeating that high-low pattern of loops. Going to add our next pin here. So we're going to have 3 in that first arc, off to the left and 3 off to the right. Now these flowers actually came out on the, or these petals, came out kind of on the small side. They were roughly 3/4 of an inch wide by 3/4 of an inch tall, depending on how many loops I used. And this really is the smallest you could make these, I think. But you could certainly make them bigger if that makes it easier for you, or if you're just working on a bigger project. And then you would not have to worry about your pins being so close together that everything was as tight as it was for me. And to do that, you would just, you know, space out your rows, your arc rows. So now I'm trying to set up for the next one, I believe. I can't get my fingers in there to get a hold of that. There we go. And now I'm looking again just to check my placement, and it looks like one of my pins is off. So I am going to fix that and put that back where it goes, but it's in there a little tight. So we'll just start with this and we'll add our pins as we go. It looks like I might have deleted some of the wrong footage when I was editing, because I think right there I would have probably taken that out. But here we go, we're on to flower number whatever, flower petal, I don't know, we're already up to 3 or 4 I think, so I should have been counting. Going to try to get a hold of that where I can pull my tweezers in here, because that's a really long tail there in the center, and I just want to make sure it's glued down as good as possible. Alright, so now we're going to start adding our pins and creating our different sizes loops. We're just going to pull that strip back up to the top. Again, we're going to insert our pin and then loop around it, down around the bottom where we add glue, and back up to the other side where we repeat. So pull your strip up, insert your pin, and then loop back down and go over back to the left. And this time those were the lower loops. Now we want to make our upper loops. And again, we're just repeating that high-low pattern. So far, this looks exactly like the last one, so I'm not sure where it changes, but it should be a completely different configuration. So up to this point, it's the same as the previous one. Okay, so I'm going to add a long loop or a tall loop to the bottom of this one on both sides. So instead of the last loop being one of the short loops, it's going to be a long loop. So I know I'm bouncing back and forth between different words, but high, long, tall are all the same. Short, let's see, what else would I have on the short side? Down, short, down are the same. So I barely had enough left of this strip, which was again 10.5 inches, to finish this particular flower or flower petal. But again, it's just very kind of open and lacy looking. On to the next one. That's the layout I'm starting with my pins. And in this one I have taken that center pin, the third one in the center row, out. So I'm doing something a little different here. Again, I'm just forming that initial loop around those first two pins. My least favorite method of looping, and yet I did it the most. So then we're going to go high this time because our center loop is a short one or a low one. And then we come to the other side and do the same thing. We take the high pin. And each time we go left, right, we're just going right next to that set of loops or to the strip of paper that's already there. You always want to hug that next strip of paper, at least in this technique. So we're going to add another pin. This will be a short pin. I'm just trying to decide where I want it. And I'm going to put it right in next to that previously short pin, except that I've realized I didn't pull my strip up, so I'm probably going to have to pull that pin out unless I can easily get it to fit down in there, which looks like it did this time. It doesn't always. But that did remind me to do it the next time, because I know I got lucky that first time. So we're going to add our pin on the right side next to that center pin that's on the first arced row. And we're going to loop up and down around that. And as always, we are forever gluing at the bottom. So that was low on the left and the right. Now we're going to go high on the left and the right. I think I need to put some grippy stuff on the back of my husking board because it's sliding all over the place. And I apologize about that. Alright, so now it's time for another low pin. Except I just went high. I didn't add a low pin. So this is either a mistake I'm going to figure out here, or I'm just going to leave it that way. I guess I decided to leave it that way. So now we're going to add the last two short pins again to the bottom row where that slotted pin is, and we're going to go on the left and the right. And it looks like I'm going to actually add a couple more pins. So we're going to come down to the next row right next to the pins that we just put in, and we're going to add two more kind of mid-length loops, but I would say they're really still short loops, just like we did on one of the previous ones. Maybe I used the same video footage twice. If I did, I apologize. I'll try to fix that if that's the case. This is a rather long video, so I do apologize. Now here the pins are so tightly packed in a couple of different places that it's really hard to get the finished piece off. So I end up having to pull some pins out just to kind of make it a little bit looser and easier to get it to slide off. And there you go. I think that's pretty cute. And then I'm just kind of bending those loops down a little, or those petals or whatever you want to call them, down a little bit, because I think when you add a stem to that, it'll look really nice just the way it is. So I'm going to move on to the next flower petal here. And this time I'm going to use the slotted pen, and I'm going to insert my 10.5 inch strip with leaving a little bit of a tail, maybe a 1/4 inch, 1/4 to 1/2 inch, and then I'm just going to start rolling it. But when the paper rolls around the pen to meet the paper, that's when I add the glue. And then I just give it a little bit more of a roll and pinch it really good until that glue is set. And I'm scraping off some glue from previous projects. And then I insert my pen back in. And try to get it all the way pressed down till it's flush with the board. And so once again, we are going to come up and around this next lower pen and glue at the bottom. Now I could have gone to the right of that pen instead of the left, but I was hoping it would give me a little bit more interest on the inside. I can't say that it did, but you can do it whatever's comfortable for you. So now we're doing the high pins on the left and the right. Now we're going to add a low pin. And again, it's on that lower arc, and it's right next to your center pin on your first loop, or your top pin on the first loop, but it's a low pin. Or we're going to move it. What am I doing here? Nope, put it back in. I don't know what that was for. Alright, so loop down, and then we're going to come up and loop around, pull our strip to the top again, and we're going to add another pin on that lower arc. And slide that pin into that hole next to the previous, or the center pin. And come back down. So to some of you, it may look like these petals are all the same, and I'm not even sure now that they're all different. I think a couple of them might have been the same, but there are very subtle differences in most of them. And you can pick your favorite. You can decide you don't like any of them, or you can just kind of play around with it yourself. Take this and kind of do your own thing with it. So now we're going to come up on the left. We're going to have to add another pin, I believe. And again, we're going right next to that lowest pin on the lower arc on the left. That was a lot of L words. So you pull your strip up on the right, add your next pin. You do want to be careful. If you pull your paper too tight, it might tear, and I did actually have that happen on one of mine, because you're really trying to push that pin back in to a space that's already occupied, so to speak. So now we'll do these upper loops. Or we will add another strip because I am out of paper, it looks like. So I'm just going to pull those out of there and set them off to the side. Once again, this is really tight to get off of there because those 5 pins that are so close together there on that lower arc, I end up taking a couple of them out. I need my tweezers to help me because they're so tightly packed in there, I can't really get a hold of them. And there's another cute little flower petal. Or entire flower, depending on how you want to use it. You can wrap these, you can pinch them up a little bit, wrap them up a little tighter. You can do that on any of these, I just didn't. Part of my process is I'm afraid I'm going to forget what I wanted to do, so I hurry up onto the next step, and that's why it might seem a little discombobulated, because it is. So here I'm just kind of showing you how you could add a strip. This is just a plain green strip. I should have just laid it down, it would have been easier, but I held it up on end, and you can see how that would kind of look if it were its own, you know, one individual flower instead of a petal. So here we're getting to my final, I believe this is the final flower, and this is my favorite, ended up being my favorite way of doing it, where I make a pre-loop on the strip before I actually start weaving it or looping it or whatever. And I just want to take that loop and slide it down around that slotted pin. However, I ended up getting it in the slot, which I couldn't have done if I tried to, but since I didn't try, it happened. So there we go. So once I've got that slotted around there, I'm ready to go. I just pull my strip up and over that next loop, or that next pin, to make my loop, and I come down and I glue. And this ended up being my favorite for a couple of reasons. One, you can see it adds a little extra shape or style to that center loop, where it's not just an open loop. It kind of looks like an S is inside of it, and I ended up liking the way that looked better. So now we're doing our next loops, which are our upper loops in the second arced loop, or arced row. I need terminology. If there's anybody who has a resource for the terminology of a husking board, I would love to have you share that with me, because I'm just, as you can tell, winging it. So now we're going to add our next pin, which is the lower pin, and I did not pull my strip up, which is going to make this a little harder. But it looks like it went down in there okay. It doesn't always. In fact, most of the time it didn't. So that was the short strip, or the low loop. Now we're going to do the one on the right. Now I would say you always mirror left, right, but that's not necessarily true. It just depends on the project you're working on. In this particular video, everything's, left, right. You mirror it from one side to the other. Whether you start on the left or the right, it doesn't really matter, as long as you mirror it on the opposite side. So those were our high loops, or long loops. Now we're going to add another short pin. Again, right next to those 3 pins that are already grouped together. So this is going to be another really tight fit in here. So don't pull your strip too tight, because it won't leave you enough room to insert that pin, which might rip your strip on the loop that it's next to. So now we're going to add another pin out here on that second arch, and it's going to be a long one or a tall one, and then we will mirror that on the right side. So I am going to add another strip here. I really only needed half a strip, so you're using one 10.5 inch strip plus another half of a 10.5 inch strip, which is 5 1/4, and I'm just gluing it together here. I glued the whole strip, but you just really need a half a strip is what I decided. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this flower petal. But before I do that, I think I'm going to add a couple more loops. Yep, here we go. We're going to do next our short loops, and again, we're going right into that next, right next to that pin, that previous pin, in that first arced loop, or arced circle. What am I trying to say? I don't know. That first arc. So we've done the left and the right. And here's just to give you a better look of the pin placement. And again, I'm going to have to remove some pins because this is super tight. I have a tendency to pull my strips really tight, which isn't necessarily the best, especially when you're working with such tight loops. But there's the finished product, and I really think that's adorable. I love that. That's my favorite one so far. And we are going to pinch this a little bit at the bottom, and then we're going to wrap it. And this, I'm just trying to shape it here. I'm kind of speeding through the wrapping because I played with it a couple times. How many, wraps do I want? And I wrapped the whole strip, and I went, that's way too many. Unwrapped some of them, and I think I ended up wrapping it like 3 times, 2 or 3 times, before I tore it off and glued it. And that's the finished flower petal. And again, my favorite one of all, right there. Okay, so here we have all 7 different flower petals, and you can see they're all individually different and unique, but by the time you wrap them, there's very little difference. I mean, if you really got close and studied them, you could probably see the differences, but otherwise not so much. So there you have it, folks. Thanks for joining me. This is Georgiana with Expressions Craft Studio, and until next time, have a happy crafty day.